What would have happened if Joe Biden or Barack Obama, or frankly, any president before them or in between them, stood before a national audience and suggested we change the name of American football to appease a European-based soccer league?
When you look at what has happened to football in the United States, again, soccer in the United States, we seem to never call it that because we have a little bit of a conflict with another thing that's called football. But when you think about it, shouldn't it really be called? I mean, this is football. There's no question about it. We have to come up with another name for this.
Yeah.
It really doesn't make sense when you think about it. It is really football.
That is, again, the leader of the Republican Party, a party that once tried to change the name of French fries to freedom fries, remember that, just to spite the nation of France in that case, suggesting that American football give up its name to accommodate soccer. Now, the backstory of this whole episode also is even crazier, because the reason Trump was on that stage ranting about changing the name of the most popular sport in America was so he could accept a made-up peace prize from the notoriously corrupt soccer organization FIFA. Actually, I take that back, because FIFA actually gave the president two made-up awards today. One big trophy, we can see it on their screen right there, and what looked like a big gold coin taped to a lanyard cable, I guess, the thing what's around his neck there. It was all a part of what they are calling the FIFA Peace Prize, an award that is not a real thing and never existed before this year and was clearly just invented to make Trump feel good about himself. Never mind the fact that the organization handing out this so-called Peace Prize has been accused of everything from corruption and bribery to abusing migrant workers building soccer stadiums in the Middle East. That's the organization that gave it out, which basically means that, the irony doesn't even begin to tell the story here. It's completely crazy and totally ironic. But this is how Donald Trump treats the American presidency these days. He's slapping his name on the U.S. Institute of Peace to feed his already overinflated ego. He's changing the architect for his new White House ballroom, another absurd vanity project occupying all of his time. He's attending what is essentially a private concert by the Village People and doing that kind of weird little dance he does that I just can't even recreate whatever's happening on the screen right now. And when all of that tuckers him out, and it seems to be tuckering him out, he enjoys dozing off in the middle of cabinet meetings. And all of that, everything I just showed you, was just within the past week. Politico's Jonathan Martin summed it up pretty perfectly in his piece, The President Who Never Grew Up. Martin wrote that, quote, Trump has turned the office into an adult fantasy camp, a Tom Hanks in Big, ice cream for dinner, escapade, posing as a presidency. It's pretty good. Let's be honest, that seems to be how Trump always envisioned the presidency, even back in his first term. It's kind of always how he wanted it to be. But here's the thing. Back then, when Trump wanted to indulge his inner man-child, he had a crew of far more competent handlers around to make sure that someone was still running the country. You could rest a little easier knowing there were at least a few grown-ups, especially in the national security space, around who could keep a handle on things. And if the little boy snapped awake occasionally or took a break from playtime with a big, bright idea, they could, at times, find a way to stop him. When Trump proposed court-martialing two decorated military leaders, for example, just for criticizing him, his defense secretary stepped in and said, let's maybe not do that. When Trump raised the question of what would happen if the military started shooting protesters in the legs, Trump's defense secretary again told him, hey, that's a bad idea. And when Trump wanted to fire missiles at suspected drug dealers south of the U.S. border, his defense secretary said, maybe let's not violate international law. But that was then, and this is now.
We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
Maximum lethality. That guy, the former Fox News Weekend host, decrying the stupid rules of engagement for armed conflict, has spent the past week embroiled in scandal over his department's apparent decision to defy those very rules. Every day we learn new harrowing details about the Trump administration's decision to launch missile attacks on boats in the Caribbean, which many experts believe could amount to war crimes. I mean, just today, we got even more new details about one of those strikes, and I'm going to get to that later in this hour. But what's important to note here is that Pete Hegseth is enabling Donald Trump in every way that his predecessors would not. This time, when Trump says he wants to court-martial critics like Senator Mark Kelly, Pete Hegseth says, yeah, sure thing, why not? When a Democratic senator asked if Pete Hegseth would follow a Trump order to shoot protesters in the legs, Hegseth won't rule it out. And when Trump again asked to carry out extrajudicial strikes in the Western Hemisphere, Pete Hegseth says, great idea. I'll go do that. That's what happens when the man-child in the White House taps another man-child to run the Department of Defense. And here's the other problem. Trump's cabinet members aren't just indulging his juvenile impulses. They're indulging their own. Like, say, Trump's FBI director, Kash Patel. I mean, for weeks, Patel has faced mounting scrutiny over his decision to turn America's premier law enforcement agency into his own personal concierge service. Using the FBI jet for date night with his 27-year-old girlfriend and to hang with his bros at something that's literally called Boondoggle Ranch. I mean, you'd think he could find a different ranch, even though it's clearly a boondoggle. He's also given his 27-year-old girlfriend her own dedicated security detail. That's not a thing that happens. But today we also learned that Patel's misuse of government resources goes even further. According to new reporting from MS Now's Carol Leonnig and Ken Zelanian, Kash Patel has, on more than one occasion, ordered that the security detail protecting his 27-year-old girlfriend escort one of her allegedly inebriated friends home after a night of partying in Nashville, according to 3 people with knowledge of the incidents. In other words, Kash Patel is making career FBI agents act as chauffeurs for the supposedly drunk friends of the woman he is dating, just to put a fine point on it all. And when agents objected to being diverted from their assignments, which is understandable, Kash Patel insisted they follow his girlfriend's request. On one occasion, he even called the leader of the security detail and yelled at him, according to those 3 sources. There used to be people in Trump's orbit who would push back on these kinds of things. But today, those people are gone. And all we seem to be left with is man-children enabling their Gen Z's girlfriend's drunk BFF. That's where we are. How does a dedicated public servant or a career military officer or just anyone willing to act like an adult push back on all of this? That's a big question, and I have just the person to ask. Joining us now is Miles Taylor. He was chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security during Donald Trump's first term in office. He's now co-founder of Defiance.org. We have talked about this before, just about the differences between the second term and the first term. I mean, you were part of the effort, of course, as everybody knows well, to push back on Trump in his first term. And now it's obvious. It's very obvious. Every week that passes, it's more and more obvious that those guardrails are completely gone. Talk to me about what has stuck out to you over the past couple of weeks. To me, there's incompetent people. There's Trump feeling unleashed. What has really stuck out to you?
Well, I mean, look, Jen, start with the fact that in the first term, we even had to say that there were so-called adults in the room. I mean, that in and of itself should tell you everything you need to know about Donald Trump. And look, I didn't know him well personally when I came into that administration. I met him once during the transition period. And then, like most of his cabinet and sub-cabinet officials, got to know him in meetings and witnessing his decision making. And they, like me, tended to find that he was the most undisciplined and impulsive and uninformed and sloppy, confused, and often cruel person most of them had ever met in their life. And that's why that term, adults in the room, emerged, because you have a person like that, they require some kind of supervision, not to stop them from doing the things they're allowed to do lawfully, but to keep them from breaking the law. The thing that Donald Trump has said the past few weeks is sedition, is the thing most of us think is what public servants should do: speak truth to power and refuse to do illegal things. And if that's seditious, by the way, Jen, then I'm guilty of sedition, because we did refuse to do illegal things. You don't break the law for the president. But watching the past couple of weeks and given your intro tonight, Jen, I mean, it strikes me that if you try to sum up what this second term has looked like, by the numbers, you are seeing on average more than one revenge action a day from this man. There have been dozens of constitutional violations, according to the courts. There have been hundreds of illegal acts, according to the courts. There have been thousands of questionable pardons, as you and Chris Hayes noted, and hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money that has been allegedly pilfered for his own benefit, to say nothing of the billions of dollars that are being wasted to try to turn this country from a shining city on a hill to a fortified bunker in a mountain. So I would say, Jen, the question is, how's that for making America great again? Because that's what this man has achieved.
One of the other things that's been striking, it feels to me more than it was in the first term, is Trump's consistently saying he's basically out of the loop. I mean, he was asked about the strikes on Wednesday, which is 5 days after the reporting first came out. He still oddly sounded out of the loop. I just want to play that for you again.
As far as the attack is concerned, I still haven't gotten a lot of information because I rely on Pete.
I mean, he basically says he didn't have the information because he relies on Pete Hegseth. I don't know if we believe that, if it's punting, if he's using Hegseth as the scapegoat. What do you make of all of that?
Well, sometimes, Jen, he's lying. Sometimes he's lying because he doesn't want to be caught doing something unlawful. He doesn't want to be tied to something, even that's just going to be unpopular. But sometimes it's also because he's just that uninformed. I mean, the man didn't read. I mean, this was one of the first problems in the first month that I was there. Is I thought it was a joke when someone told me, hey, you can't send that 5-page memo up to the White House. I thought 5 pages, that was pretty, it was pretty good. We cut this thing down from 60 pages. They said, no, you can't take that into the Oval unless it's a page and it better have a graphic on it. And in fact, you're in even better shape if you just have 1 point in written word, maybe a sentence, and a graphic. We're not talking about a high school football coach. We're talking about the president of the United States. And some of the most complex issues we're facing, like airstrikes against military targets, you really can't sum up very well in 1 bullet point and a picture. But I mean, I could tell you story after story about how that's what we had to do. We had to prep with basically a coloring book before going into the Oval Office. They can laugh for a moment about that, but they should be mad about that. They should be pissed off that the president of the United States is so disengaged that he can't dial into the details, because the details, as you know better than anyone, Jen, are where policy is made. The details are life and death. And so Donald Trump will conveniently not dig into the details, either to avoid accountability or just because he's checked out.